Hey guys, Tyler here. Star Trek Deep Space Nine is the third live-action Trek show, having aired from 1993 to 1999. Set on the Bajoran-owned, Federation-operated space station of the same name, DS9 is notably more serialized than previous Trek installments, during a time before serialization was popular on American television. The first Trek to be created by Rick Berman and Michael Piller rather than Gene Roddenberry, DS9 is also the only Trek series to have aired alongside other Trek productions throughout its entire run. In its early seasons, the show is initially centered on domestic concerns of Bajor and discoveries in the Gamma Quadrant beyond the newly uncovered Bajoran wormhole. But DS9 evolves into an accounting of the Cold, then Hot War with the totalitarian regime known as the Dominion. DS9 is often considered the best Trek series, but like all shows, it has its strong and weak moments. In this video, I'd like to analyze the lore of Deep Space Nine, cataloging its additions to canon, and maybe offering my opinions on a lot of the episodes. It should go without saying that this video will contain spoilers, but given this show went off the air a quarter-century ago, I hope you'll forgive me. With that, let's get started. Before we dive in, a word from today's sponsor, Architects of Fate. Hey, are you looking to build an adventure with friends? Well, I just might have the place for you. Architects of Fate is a Twitch channel that specializes in tabletop RPGs with an emphasis on interactive gameplay and storytelling, all for free. Just by jumping into chat, you can make the lives of the game master and players easier or harder. It's up to you. Not only do Architects of Fate play well-known tabletop RPGs like 5th edition D&D, but they also play less common RPGs like Star Trek, Star Wars, Conan, Aliens, and more. Plus totally original games like Solar Patrol, and Bad Horse's Evil League of Evil with the two-headed DM. Architects of Fate even has community game nights with chat. They're always looking for new games to share with each other and invite you to play alongside them. The goal of each stream is to make sure every viewer and player gets their chance to contribute and shine. For viewers of this video, check out Star Trek Bajor Rising on Mondays, featuring an ad hoc team of junior officers on the Galaxy-class USS Odyssey. Players embark on official and classified missions in support of Bajoran independence during the Cardassian occupation. They discover the prophets may not be mythical, and another greater enemy may have plans for that sector. Join in to help weave tales of covert operations, moral dilemmas, and the struggle for freedom. There's also a Tuesday game called Strange New Playtest, set in the TOS era on the USS Challenger, and testing the new rules in the Star Trek 2nd Edition adventure, The Celestial Algorithm. Started in early 2019 by Chief Architect Nat Too Shabby, Architects of Fate continues his family's tradition of tabletop gaming and late-night storytelling by sharing the experience with everyone. So come watch and join a group of players to write new stories and forge new friendships. Architects of Fate can be watched live on Twitch or rewatched on YouTube at the links on screen and in the description below. Big thanks to Architects of Fate for sponsoring this video. Now, back to DS9. The decision to set DS9 on a space station instead of a starship spawned when Brandon Tartikoff, then CEO of Paramount, approached Rick Berman in 1991. He specifically wanted the next Star Trek show to have a format that was classically Western, yet still new to the franchise. If TOS and TNG were wagon train in space, DS9 would be the rifleman. That is, a man and his son coming to a dilapidated frontier town on the edge of known civilization. Berman brought this idea to Michael Piller, and the two began developing the series proper. The showrunners had everything: the country doctor in the form of Julian Bashir, played by Alexander Siddig, the barkeep, the Ferengi Quark, played by Armin Shimmerman, the sheriff, the shapeshifter Constable Odo, played by Rene Auberjonois, the mayor in the form of Commander Benjamin Sisko, played by Avery Brooks, the common man, Chief Engineer Miles O'Brien, played by Colm Meaney, and the native, Major Kieran Nerys of the Bajoran Militia, played by Nana Visitor. Rounding out the main cast, of course, would also be Sirach Lofton as Jake Sisko, and Operations Manager Lieutenant Jadzia Dax, played by Terry Farrell, and sporting an updated makeup design for the Trill species. Indeed, in addition to the Bajorans, Ferengi, and Trill, Trill, DS9 focuses on many alien races first introduced in TNG, like the Cardassians. Later, this would come to include the Klingons and Romulans, first introduced in TOS, as well, among others. And the show would introduce many species of its own, most notably the Changelings, Vorta, and Jem'Hadar. The portrayal of the Ferengi themselves was also altered significantly from their previous depiction as rather comical villains in TNG. Now, they are mostly entrepreneurs, and the Ferengi Alliance is a politically neutral power. In addition to setting the show on a space station to differentiate it from TNG, a fixed location on DS9 would also give the show the opportunity to look deeper at the inner workings of the Federation, to see how it deals with the types of problems one would not encounter on a traveling starship. Whereas on TNG, issues raised each week could simply be forgotten the following week when the ship went somewhere else, on a space station, events can't be left behind as easily and would have implications for the future. In other words, actions have consequences. The setting also allowed a large cast of recurring characters to be set up with relative ease, resulting in multi-layered relationships that were, up to that point, unique in Star Trek. In the writer's eyes, if TOS and TNG were about discovering new things about other races, DS9 would be about discovering new things about ourselves. Not that DS9 wouldn't also explore new worlds too. As we'll see, just like Voyager would open up a whole quadrant of the galaxy to explore, DS9 would open one as well, and the consequences will change the state of galactic politics and society forever. The show was also designed to have more interpersonal conflict than its predecessors, while still staying true to the universe Gene Roddenberry created. The showrunners created an environment the Starfleet officers essentially didn't want to be in, which caused conflict itself. And in turn, the people who lived in this part of space wouldn't be all that happy about Starfleet being there either. These weren't the perfectly engineered humans of TNG and the big happy family of the Enterprise. DS9's humans feel more real, and the presence of many non-Starfleet characters heightens the potential for drama. The Bajorans' spirituality and mysticism runs highly contrary to the super-secular, scientific ethos carried by the main Starfleet characters. The name of the show was also a working title during development that never got changed, and while the showrunners were reportedly dissatisfied with it, I think the words Deep Space Nine effectively communicate the remoteness of the show's setting. Initially, the Bajoran first officer aboard DS9 would have been Ro Laren, but she was replaced by Kira as Michelle Forbes did not want to commit to a 6-year contract to work on DS9. As a matter of fact, the reason the show was set on Bajor in the first place was originally because of Ro. But while Ro is an interesting character, I think Kira's depth has been kind of unparalleled in Star Trek. As Michael Piller put it, the writers liked the idea of having someone work with Commander Sisko who'd be a thorn in his side, who'd represent a different point of view. That would produce plenty of conflict and interesting dynamics between both characters. As for Sisko himself, in Piller's words, every hero needs a journey. You want to take your leading man on a quest where he has to overcome personal issues, as well as whatever space stuff happens to be out there. The idea of a man who is broken and who begins to repair himself is always a great beginning for a drama. On Julian, Piller said he was conceived of as a flawed character, one who needed to be brought down to size in order to grow. And thus, he was written as kind of a jerk for much of the first season. The presence of a Ferengi character in Quark would provide the show instant comic relief and built-in conflict. He's a constant thorn in the side of the law, but has a sense of humor about it. Odo would serve the niche of the Data or Spock character who strives to pass as human. Jadzia would allow the writers to explore the Trill further, and O'Brien's backstory, being a veteran of the Cardassian Wars, made obvious sense. The first episode of DS9, Emissary, begins with an event we've seen before, the Battle of Wolf 359, in which the Borg make their initial incursion into the Sol system, from a certain point of view. Oh yeah, and speaking of a certain point of view, Emissary shows this pivotal conflict from the perspective of one Benjamin Sisko, first officer of the USS Saratoga. In the course of the conflict, Sisko's wife Jennifer is killed, leaving Ben alone to raise their son Jake. 2 years later, Sisko has been assigned as commander of the Federation space station, Deep Space Nine, orbiting the planet Bajor, where the Cardassian Union has withdrawn after a 50-year brutal occupation. We meet the other major characters of the show, starting with O'Brien, transferred from the Enterprise D. Sisko's first officer, Kira, has one of the best character introductions in Star Trek. Given her experience during the Bajoran Resistance, Kira is rather apprehensive to trust the Federation and is not surprised to hear Sisko say they're only here to help.
The Federation is only here to help.
Help us. Yes, I know. The Cardassians said the same thing 60 years ago.
Of course, throughout the season and the series, Kira will find herself in the somewhat awkward position of actually having to use her power as an officer of the militia, being part of the establishment. For instance, in the aptly named Progress, she must force a Bajoran civilian to evacuate a moon that's being converted into a massive energy source, a classic needs of the many situation.
You're on the other side now. Pretty uncomfortable, isn't it?
We also meet Odo and Quark, both of whose makeup design will subtly change over the course of Season 1, much like how Worf's did in the early seasons of TNG. Speaking of TNG, Emissary also features a meeting between Sisko and Captain Picard to finish briefing him on his mission, which is to do everything short of violating the Prime Directive to secure Bajor's entry into the Federation. As Sisko notes, this is actually the second time they've met. The first time, Picard was assimilated as Locutus and was, indirectly or not, responsible for the deaths of Jennifer and 11,000 others. So Sisko has kind of a different perspective on Captain Picard compared to, well, a lot of Star Trek fans. Indeed, this is an early demonstration of DS9's status as an antithesis of TNG. We're still in the Star Trek universe, but we're seeing the darker, grittier side of it. Bashir's introduction also includes a rather ignorant remark about practicing frontier medicine.
This is where heroes are made. Right here. In the wilderness.
This wilderness is my home.
Bashir has numerous interactions like this with the other characters over the series, such as another one with Kira in Episode 9, The Passenger.
Fate has granted me a gift, Major. A gift to be a healer.
I feel privileged to be in your presence.
And his combative relationship with O'Brien before the two become best friends. On the surface of the planet, Sisko also meets with Bajor's elected religious leader, Kai Opaka, who confirms that Sisko is indeed the emissary of the prophets, an outsider who Bajorans have been waiting for to save them by discovering the Celestial Temple. Opaka shows Sisko a tier of the prophets, the Orb of Prophecy and Change, and he is mentally transported to the day and place he met Jennifer. He later welcomes Lieutenant Dax to the station, and we learn Dax's previous host was the Federation ambassador Curzon, Sisko's mentor. While Jadzia has gone on to become one of the most beloved Star Trek characters, it's worth noting that her early portrayal is quite different from what a lot of people might expect. Part and parcel with Trek's tradition of making one of the main characters cold and logical, such as Spock and Data, early Jadzia can kind of come off as stiff. I initially thought it was a problem with Terry Farrell's acting, but I realized that wasn't really fair. It's the writers trying to make the character fill this niche. In any event, Jadzia is wise beyond her years, and her playful dismissal of Julian's advances makes for some decent comedy relief. Jadzia's experience with Dax's previous lifetimes not only makes her a very dynamic, well-rounded character, it makes for some unique storylines, like her being put on trial for crimes by a previous host in the excellent episode Dax. And as I pointed out in my criminally underviewed video on the Trill species, when it comes to countless remarks Jadzia makes throughout the series, one could understand how the Trill have come to be regarded as an allegory for the transgender community.
I was a young man. Once.
Midway through Emissary, Sisko gets a welcoming message from the station's previous commander, Gul Dukat, played by Mark Alimo, who fishes for information about the orb. The Cardassians thought they'd acquired all of them, and Cardassian interest in making another move on the Bajoran system after withdrawing intensifies after Sisko and Dax stumble upon the Bajoran wormhole, the first known stable wormhole in the galaxy, which connects the Alpha Quadrant with a point in the Gamma Quadrant 70,000 light-years away. Sisko is then transported again to the Celestial Temple, where he explains linear time to the prophets, including through analogies involving his favorite game, baseball. Baseball comes up quite a bit throughout DS9, including in If Wishes Were Horses, where we meet a figment of sorts of Buck Bokai of the London Kings, who informs us about how, like television, baseball pretty much died out on Earth in the 2040s. In any event, the discovery of the Bajoran wormhole is unequivocally one of the most important events in recent galactic history, and unequivocally puts Bajor on the map. Like I said in the beginning of this video, the majority of DS9's first 2 seasons more or less deal with 2 main central storylines. Number 1 is how Starfleet and other Alpha Quadrant players deal with, again, new discoveries from the Gamma Quadrant, whether they're visiting the Bajoran system or uncovered by exploratory vessels on the other side. The other is, of course, the local affairs of Bajor and how Sisko balances his duties as a Starfleet officer with his role as Emissary. Honestly, that's also descriptive of the series as a whole, but in seasons 1 and 2, we also get hints and glimpses about one of the biggest developments to come: Federation first contact with the Dominion. Besides an offhand comment about shapeshifters from the Gamma Quadrant in the episode Vortex, the Dominion isn't even mentioned until Season 2, Episode 7, Rules of Acquisition. But before that, we've got some more introductions. For one, Elam Garak, played by Andrew Robinson, a simple tailor who very clearly wants to have sex with Bashir. A more contentious relationship, though, seems to have cropped up between O'Brien and his wife Keiko, who is not happy about leaving the Enterprise. As many others have pointed out, the way Miles and Keiko's marriage is written, trying to convince people that these two characters actually like each other may be a harder task than getting Bajor into the Federation. Episode 4, A Man Alone, also introduces Quark's brother Rom, played by Max Grodenchik, whose voice and disposition are somewhat different from his subsequent appearances.
We throw them into the cutthroat competition of Ferengi commerce, and anyone who survives graduates.
This episode gives us some insight into Odo's perspective on justice, which, over the course of the series, sometimes puts him at odds with Starfleet's security interests on the station, especially after he's asked to coordinate with Starfleet security personnel like Primin in Season 1 and Michael Eddington in Season 2 and beyond. Eddington we'll come back to. A Man Alone is followed by a couple excellent, in my opinion, episodic entries, Babel, in which the crew must cure a weaponized aphasia virus, and Captive Pursuit, a classic Prime Directive episode involving an alien species bred to be hunted, called the Tosk. While these episodes serve well to depict how the characters deal with novel situations, Q-less serves as another early reminder of DS9's contrast with TNG. After a 2-year escapade in the Gamma Quadrant, Q and the archaeologist Vash, the latter last seen in the TNG episode Cupid, visit the station. And, well, Q and Sisko don't get along.
You hit me. Picard never hit me. I'm not Picard.
Starfleet's attitude towards the Ferengi haven't really changed. Frankly, most of the main characters act pretty bigoted towards Quark and his people. DS9 does an excellent job of demonstrating how Trek humans can be pretty hypocritical with their preaching of tolerance. The Grand Nagus, for all intents and purposes an interstellar head of state, is treated as something of a joke. I've gained more of an appreciation over the years with what the writers were trying to do with the Ferengi, and even though a lot of Ferengi episodes aren't my favorites, Quark is a good character. He can be a greedy asshole, but he has a conscience and offers great insight into what it's like to be an outsider to the Federation on a Starfleet-administered space station. He's just trying to run a business, man. Maybe do a little crimes on the side. Kai Opaka meets her end, at least it first seems, in Battle Lines, which features guest star Jonathan Banks. But due to the nature of the planet she's crash-landed on, even if she still lives, she can't exactly leave, which throws a wrench into Bajoran politics. The two leading candidates to become the next Kai are Vedic Wyn Adami, played by Louise Fletcher, who disrupts one of Keiko's science lessons in The Hands of the Prophets, and Vedic Bareil Antos, with whom Kira engages in a romantic relationship. Kira's affection for Bareil elicits a pretty noticeable reaction from Odo, who secretly has feelings for Kira, although it'll be a while before he's comfortable expressing them. He does have a brief encounter with Loaxana Troi, but to call it reciprocal would be a lie. Well, for the most part. It might also be surprising to fans on rewatch to see how antagonistic Kira and Odo's relationship can be at the start, but as we're reminded in episodes particularly like Necessary Evil, Odo did work for the Cardassians. In comments like this,
"Give me the right to set a curfew. Let me do more searches of arriving passengers. Give me 50 more deputies."
And the station will be just the way it was during the occupation.
demonstrate that Odo can often muddy the waters between justice and oppressive tactics, a subtle hint at the authoritarian nature of his changeling brethren. Regardless, all in all, Season 1 succeeds, in my view, in establishing the relevant setting-related information we need to know about the series. While there are some weak episodes like Move Along Home, Season 1 has some peak episodes like Duet that's basically a perfect exploration of morality, something Star Trek is best known for.
My trial will force Cardassia to acknowledge its guilt. And we're guilty, all of us. But that is necessary.
He's a Cardassian. That's reason enough.
No! It's not.
And we also learn that Kira was part of the Shakar resistance cell during the occupation. Season 2 opens with a 3-part episode involving a xenophobic Bajoran extremist group, The Circle, that is being propped up by the Cardassians in an effort to retake the system. Indeed, this season has quite a few episodes that involve Cardassians, more so than Season 1. Episode 5 puts Miles' prejudice to the test when he and Keiko take in a Cardassian war orphan. Remember, Miles was forced to kill multiple Cardassians during his service in the Federation-Cardassian War.
It's not you I hate, Cardassian. I hate what I became.
Another 2-part episode introduces the Maquis, Federation colonists who have more or less been abandoned under the terms of the Federation-Cardassian Treaty. Their colonies were transferred to the Cardassian side of the border, and now their rebellion against the Cardassians in the demilitarized zone threatens to reignite the Federation-Cardassian War. As Sisko puts it, unlike on Earth, where it's easy to be a saint in paradise, all the problems haven't been solved in the DMZ. These people are fighting to survive. Each character's perspective on the Maquis' plight serves as a recipe for some fascinating conversations. Kira is understandably sympathetic to their cause, and Sisko is put in the awkward position of having to fight a friend of his to uphold the treaty. And while one might expect Miles to take the side of the Maquis, as we see in the excellent episode The Tribunal, which gives us some insight into the Cardassian justice system, his loyalty to the Federation is unbreakable. Quark reunites with an old Cardassian flame of his in Profit and Loss, but must let her go so she can continue to aid the Cardassian underground. And more light is shed on Garrick's backstory in The Wire, where we meet Enabran Tain, played by Paul Dooley, and a former high-ranking member of the Obsidian Order, Cardassia's primary intelligence agency. The suspicions that Garrick is a spy never cease to intensify, and he doubles down on his deceptive nature with one of the most memed interactions in all of DS9.
What I want to know is, out of all the stories you told me, which ones were true and which ones weren't?
They're all true.
Even the lies.
Especially the lies.
Farrell and the writers definitely get more comfortable with establishing Jadzia's personality this season. Some Dax-centric stories include invasive procedures, in which a jealous Trill temporarily steals the Dax symbiont, and in playing God, when Jadzia must evaluate another Trill initiate for joining, his reaction to her party animal personality causes some of Jadzia's own insecurities to come to the forefront. The middle of Season 2 has some rather one-note episodic installments like Armageddon Game, where we learn Julian has a foot fetish.
She had the most exquisite feet. I'm serious. It's very important for a dancer to have good arches.
Can you blame me for making that joke? And Paradise, where Cisco and O'Brien encounter a colony run by an anti-technology cult leader.
Alexis doesn't believe in doors.
Harder, Pirate Queen, Mommy. What the shit are you doing?
Get the fuck out of here!
Damn it!
Get the fuck out of here!
But not all of these entries are bad, to be clear. Whispers is a classic O'Brien Must Suffer episode where we find out a replicant has taken his place on DS9 during a sensitive mission in the Parada system, and the ending tugs at the heartstrings. But one of the more consistent arcs throughout Season 2 involves further revelations about the Dominion, and Odo's true potential as a changeling, though it's not known yet that the changelings are the founders of the Dominion. In Sanctuary, refugees from the Skria arrive through the wormhole after escaping persecution by the T-Rogarans, members of the Dominion. The Skria believe that they're destined to resettle on Bajor, which they call Quintana, but the provisional government refuses to let the Skria immigrate as they believe it would put strain on Bajor's resources. The alternate introduces Dr. Mora Pol, the Bajoran scientist assigned to study Odo when he drifted into the Bajoran system as an infant. The two find a morphogenic sample in the Gamma Quadrant, more evidence of changeling inhabitants of that region of space, and Odo continues to demonstrate his shape-shifting talents in Shadow Play, in which Odo and Dax find a colony inhabited by holographic life forms. But if you ask me, the final 6 episodes of Season 2 are where DS9 really starts to find its footing. Blood Oath marks the first appearance on DS9 of Kor, Koloth, and Kang, 3 Klingon captains from the original series who knew Curzon Dax. Curzon, it turns out, was a key player in brokering the Federation Klingon peace, and Jadzia decides to honor a blood oath to help track down and kill an alien known as the Albino, who killed Kor, Koloth, and Kang's firstborn sons. This is probably my favorite episode of the series so far besides Duet, and while Koloth and Kang die honorable deaths in combat, we'll see more of Kor later on. Crossover is a fan favorite for bringing back the Mirror Universe from TOS's Mirror Mirror, and we learn that Spock ascended to the throne and implemented reforms that led to the Terran Empire's fall to the Klingon-Cardassian Alliance. The Alliance is unaware of the Bajoran wormhole's existence, but it'll soon come into play as Mirror Cisco helps start the Terran Rebellion. The Collaborator sees Wynn blackmail Bareil into forcing him to withdraw from the election for Kai, as Bareil helped cover up Opaka's involvement in the Kendra Valley massacre, in which she sacrificed her own son to save 1,200 Bajoran civilians. Wynn's ascension to Kai will have very significant implications for Bajor. Finally, in the season finale, the Jem'Hadar, Cisco and Quark are kidnapped by the Jem'Hadar, who demonstrate knowledge of the Alpha Quadrant's affairs. While Jake and Nog, Rom's son, played by Aaron Eisenberg, help rescue their father and uncle, first contact with the Jem'Hadar still ends bloodily as the Jem'Hadar destroy a Galaxy-class ship, the Odyssey, on a suicide run. We still haven't met the founders yet, but in addition to the Jem'Hadar, we meet Eris, a member of the Vorta, who are the administrators of the Dominion. Funny enough, Eris is a telepath, but we never meet another telepathic Vorta throughout DS9. DS9 Season 3 opens with the 2-part episode The Search, and introduces some more elements that shake up the show. First off, Cisco arrives in a new ship, the Defiant, which was originally designed to fight the Borg. It's been equipped with a Romulan-loaned cloaking device, which Starfleet has sanctioned the Defiant to use in the Gamma Quadrant for stealth missions. Joining the crew is also Starfleet officer Michael Eddington, who, like Fremen in Season 1, occasionally butts heads with Odo, over security matters. Speaking of Odo, he's drawn to the Omarion Nebula, location of the Changeling homeworld. We meet other members of his species who are part of the Great Link. The female Changeling, played by Salome Jens, reveals that Odo was one of 100 infant changelings sent through the wormhole to gather information about the Alpha Quadrant. The purpose of this, we find out, is in service of the Dominion, for not only are the changelings part of it, they are indeed the founders. Thus begins what I've come to call the Dominion Cold War arc. The Alpha Quadrant is not only aware of the Dominion, but they're aware that Odo's people are at the head of it, and the threat to galactic peace is very real. Most of Season 3 is still episodic though, with plenty of ups and downs. Counting the two-part episode Past Tense as one story, After the Search, the first half of Season 3 roughly alternates between strong and weak entries. The House of Quark offers a really entertaining Quark tale when he is forced to marry a Klingon woman after taking credit for the death of her husband. In Equilibrium, we see the Trill homeworld and symbiont breeding caves and find out the Symbiosis Commission has lied about the number of viable hosts, hiding the fact that half the population is capable of joining so as to keep the symbionts from becoming commodities. But other than that, it's not terribly memorable. Second Skin is a chilling exploration of gaslighting when Kira is kidnapped and surgically altered to appear Cardassian, being told she was a sleeper agent named Ileana Gamor. The real Ileana's father, Takini, actually becomes close with Kira as part of the Cardassian dissident movement. The Abandoned reveals details about the life stages of Jem'Hadar and explores issues around nature versus nurture, which becomes more relevant later on as Starfleet's contact with the Jem'Hadar increases. Defiant marks the unexpected return of Thomas Riker, who steals the Defiant to fight against the Maquis, and there's a thing or two he can learn from Kira, and Loaxana Troi visits the station again in Fascination, which introduces Xanthi fever, a betazoid virus that heightens the emotions of people surrounding them. One of my favorite two-parters from DS9, Past Tense, sees Sisko, Bashir, and Dax accidentally transported through time to 2024 San Francisco. In this time period, the US government has constructed sanctuary districts in every major city to house the homeless, mentally ill, and destitute to live in conditions that many have noted are quite familiar in our 2020s. Sisko and Bashir must survive in Sanctuary District A days before the historic Bell riots, led by Gabriel Bell and described as one of the most violent civil uprisings in US history, that ultimately leads to reforms that address some of America's lingering social problems. You know it's fiction because the US government actually does something about homelessness and unemployment. But anyway, Dax ends up meeting Chris Brenner, CEO of Brenner Information Systems, operator of a global communications network called Interface, that Sanctuary residents use to reveal their stories to the world. Kind of like TikTok. I'm here all week, folks. Back in the present, the next episode, Life Support, sees the heartbreaking death of Bareil Antos after he is injured in a shuttle accident during peace negotiations with Cardassia. Bareil's death naturally has a strong, lasting effect on Kira, and the peace treaty, which Bareil helps Kai Wynn finish negotiating, comes into play even more as the series goes on. And another major character arc begins with Heart of Stone, in which Nog tries to get Sisko to sponsor an application to Starfleet Academy. Sisko at first assumes this is a prank, but Nog really wants to go. He doesn't want to end up like his father Rom, who is a mechanical genius but decided to go into business, which he doesn't have the lobes for. This is probably one of my favorite arcs in the entirety of DS9, to be honest, and Nog's efforts to prove himself as a Ferengian Starfleet in many ways, I think, probably served as a template for Devana Tendi's efforts to prove herself as an Orion in Starfleet. Before Nog is sent off to the Academy in Season 4, we get to see his progress in facets, when Dax also undergoes the Jantara ritual to be able to speak with embodiments of her past hosts. Nog struggles against a training simulation, but his chances to prove he's cadet material only increase from here, even if Quark is skeptical of the Federation's influence on his nephew. While Nog embarks on his journey to become a Starfleet officer, Sisko continues to struggle balancing his Starfleet career with his role as the Emissary. In Destiny, another prophecy threatens to be fulfilled when 3 Cardassians come to the station for a joint science mission, leading to some humorous cross-cultural misunderstandings.
Then why have you been leading me to believe that you wanted me?
I haven't!
And passionate discussions about faith and interpretation of ancient translated texts. Plus, a Bajoran named Vedic Yarka speaks of a fiery trial the Emissary will undergo, a possible foreshadowing of the series finale, What You Leave Behind, in which Sisko gives up his corporeal existence to be in the Celestial Temple, for now at least. After Miles is replaced with a counterpart from an alternate timeline in Visionary, and Bashir survives an alien assault on his mind and distant voices, we visit the Mirror Universe again to see the progress of the Terran Rebellion. Mirror Sisko is dead, but Smiley has Auerbin impersonate his counterpart to bring Mirror Jennifer, an Alliance scientist, into the rebellion. Through the Looking Glass shows a number of other Mirror characters too, including Dax, Bashir, Rom, and Tuvok. But things ramp up even more in Improbable Cause, which, along with the subsequent episode The Die Is Cast, depicts the joint Obsidian Order Tal Shiar operation to destroy the Founders' homeworld. Except it's a Dominion trap. The Founders knew they were coming because they had infiltrated the Tal Shiar, and the Obsidian Order is practically destroyed. Garrick and Odo's loyalties are both tested in these episodes, which mark one of the most consequential steps in the Dominion's Cold War against the Alpha Quadrant. Explorers introduces Lita, a Bajoran Dabo girl played by Chase Masterson, who of course later goes on to become Rom's wife and then first clerk of the Ferengi Alliance. Sisko notably grows his beard out, though this isn't his final form. He and Jake build a replica of an ancient Bajoran solar sail ship and recreate an event the Cardassian government has up to this point denied: the ship's lightspeed journey to Cardassia. Jake reveals to his father that he wants to be a writer, a career path that he will stick to and that becomes a central plot point of one of the franchise's best episodes. More on that later. He also wants to set up his dad with a freighter captain named Cassidy Yates, whom we finally meet in Family Business, and the two hit it off talking about baseball teams on Cestus III, a century earlier, site of an encounter between Kirk and the Gorn. This episode also marks the first appearance of the Ferengi homeworld, Ferenginar, and introduces Ferengi Commerce Authority Liquidator Brunt, played by the one and only Jeffrey Combs, investigating Quark and Rom's mother Ishka's violation of the law that bars females from earning profit. Shakar sees the leader of Kira's former resistance cell become First Minister of Bajor after Kai Wynn makes an absolute mess of the position. And in The Adversary, Sisko is finally promoted to captain, and the Defiant is sent off to respond to a reported coup on the Zenkethi homeworld. But as it turns out, reports of this coup were false. It's another Dominion trap, and the changeling infiltration of the Alpha Quadrant is proven to already be widespread. I hope you guys forgive me, I had to take a break. Season 4 marks another major turning point for the series. For one thing, there's a new orchestration of the opening title theme music. Ben's transformation to Bald Sisko has also been completed. Later on, Kira also gets a new red uniform that she wears throughout the rest of the series. But in the feature-length season premiere, The Way of the Warrior, the crew of the station has started doing changeling drills in preparation for the inevitable Dominion invasion. Joining the cast is none other than Commander Worf, fresh off Season 7 of TNG. and Star Trek Generations. In the year and a half between the air date of TNG's finale All Good Things and The Way of the Warrior, Worf has evidently broken up with Deanna Troi, and in this episode, he transfers from the Operations Division to the Command Division. In addition to these personnel changes though, politically, the Alpha Quadrant really is on the brink of war. There's been a coup on Cardassia, and the Klingons have taken advantage of this by invading Cardassia. The Federation Council denounces the invasion, leading Gowron to withdraw the Klingon Empire from the Khitomer Accords. But as we'll see, there are some shifty characters orchestrating these events behind the scenes. In the meantime, with two major Alpha Quadrant powers distracted by war, Starfleet's responsibility in rooting out the changeling threat has become more critical than ever. After the action-packed excitement of The Way of the Warrior, Season 4 throws another one of the most beloved episodes in the entire franchise. I don't know why I said throws, it possesses. The Visitor. Tony Todd, who plays Worf's brother Kurn, plays an adult Jake Sisko in an alternate timeline where Ben was killed in an accident on the Defiant. The Visitor probably has the most emotional storytelling of really any DS9 episode for me, even if the timeline does get reset in the end when a subspace link between father and son is severed upon Jake's death. We get to see some interesting changes in the alternate future, such as Morn taking over Quark's bar by the 2390s. In the 25th century, Jadzia is still Dax's host, and Starfleet has introduced new uniform and comm badge designs. Speaking of Kurn, he actually shows up in the episode Sons of Mogh when he asks Worf to kill him after the House of Mogh loses its seat on the Klingon High Council. The episode invokes some of the same ethical issues from the TNG episode Ethics when dealing with how much Starfleet commanders are willing to comply with Klingon cultural rituals. Bashir helps Worf find a middle ground, which is to erase Kurn's memories of his previous life, so he can start anew as part of a different house. Family themes are also present in Indiscretion, in which Kira helps Dukat liberate Dukat's half-Bajoran daughter, Tora Ziyal, from a Breen prison camp. Ziyal shows up quite a bit throughout seasons 4, 5, and 6, and her impact on the other characters cannot be understated. She develops an admiration of Major Kira, and Dukat's public acknowledgement of Ziyal takes a toll on his family life. Her existence is understandably complicated, and her admiration of Kira often conflicts with Ziyal's love for her father. In the excellent Rejoined, Jadzia reassociates with a Trill scientist named Lenara Khan, who, when joined to one of Khan's previous hosts, was married to one of Dax's previous hosts as well. The episode introduces the reassociation taboo in Trill society, which functioned as a metaphor for homosexuality at a time when that was taboo in American society. Nog, continuing to fight against Ferengi stereotypes, finally goes off to Starfleet Academy in Little Green Men. Quark and Rom take him to Earth in a shuttle given to Quark by his cousin Gala, but a malfunction lands them in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, resulting in Star Trek's explanation for the Roswell UFO incident. Little Green Men shows us how Ferengi Universal Translators work by indicating they're an implantable device, which I personally think would make sense for other races as well.
Did you understand a word of that?
We also learn that the Ferengi bought warp drive and were not warp capable until after 1947. Quark suggests the Vulcans and Klingons weren't either, although this was in all likelihood a mistake on his part. Another shuttle accident results in the O'Brien's second baby Yoshi being transferred from Keiko's womb to Kira's, a playful in-universe explanation for Nana Visitor's pregnancy during late Season 4 of DS9. This is after Season 4 delivers another obligatory Miles Must Suffer episode in Hard Time, when he is given the memories of a 20-year prison sentence for alleged crimes on Argratha. Probably the most disturbing thing that's happened to him, honestly. In addition to Sons of Mogh, Bashir wrestles with medical ethics and multiple other entries in Season 4, including Hippocratic Oath, when dealing with Jim Hadar stranded on an alien world. We learn that Jim Hadar are dependent on the drug Ketracel White, although the character Goran Agar also references that they have eaten some food on the planet. he also expresses some skepticism of the founders, proving that unlike the Vorta, the Jem'Hadar are more capable of dissenting from their role in the order of things. Bashir also attempts to rid a planet of a Dominion-engineered plague in The Quickening. That arc, the Dominion wreaking havoc on planets throughout the galaxy for resisting them, hits home no better in my opinion than the two-parter Homefront and Paradise Lost, among my favorite episodes of DS9. Sisko and Odo are called back to Earth to investigate the bombing of a conference in Antwerp caused by a changeling infiltrator. Turns out there are perhaps only 4 changelings on the entire planet, but Starfleet Admiral Layton is fully prepared to launch a military coup against the democratically elected President of the Federation, Jaresh Inyo.
Until the changeling threat has been neutralized.
And how long will that be? Months, years, decades?
However long it takes.
We meet Ben's father, Joseph Sisko, played by Brock Peters, who runs a Creole restaurant in New Orleans. I love this two-parter because it demonstrates that Earth's utopian society in Star Trek is built on a system of trust, a fragile system of trust that can be taken advantage of, grounding it from the rather idealistic fantasy that Gene Roddenberry envisioned for early TNG. I mean, tell me that the Federation president declaring martial law on Earth is not a fascinating scenario to play out in the Trek universe. Starfleet institutes blood screenings for the family members of all officers, and Joseph's refusal to submit is treated with suspicion, even from Ben.
What the hell has gotten into your head? You actually thought I was one of them, didn't you?
I don't know. I wasn't sure.
The public support for increased security measures, despite their intrusion on civil liberties, is all too believable. That's how you do Dark Trek correctly. DS9's exploration of real-world political issues also continues with the episode Bar Association, in which Rom and Quark's other employees form a union. Quark does everything to try to break the union, even after the workers go on strike, including trying to use holographic waiters, reminiscent of film studios' modern attempts to replace artists with AI. For this and other reasons, this episode arguably resonates more today than it did in the 90s. I mean, for God's sakes, Rom even quotes Karl Marx.
Workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains.
Another one of DS9's more compelling arcs, in my opinion, ramps up with For the Cause, in which Michael Eddington openly defects to the Maquis, sparking much debate and discussion among the crew.
Starships chase us through the Badlands, and our supporters are harassed and ridiculed. Why? Because we've left the Federation, and that's the one thing you can't accept.
Once again, we'll come back to Eddington, but he isn't the only character who's out and about on his own adventure separate from his previous position in the series. In Return to Grace, Dukat commandeers a Klingon bird of prey and uses it to conduct a number of independent raids during the war between the Cardassians and the Klingons. Return to Grace also introduces Damar, who goes on to play a more prominent role later in the series. Sisko's discomfort with being the Emissary is still present in Season 4, particularly in Accession, when he's happy to give up the role to a time-displaced Bajoran poet from the 22nd century, who also claims to be the Emissary. But Sisko feels it's his responsibility to step in and take a more active approach when the new Emissary tries to reinstitute a caste system on Bajor. Caste systems, we learn, violate the Federation Charter, which may be an amendment based on the experience of Kirk's crew with the Ardanans in The Cloud Minders. This is also the first episode in which the prophets say they are of Bajor, which has led some fans, including me, to speculate that they could be descended from far future Bajorans. Because, you know, like, they live outside of time, so our future would be their past. It's not linear. Another trip to the Mirror Universe in Shattered Mirror sees Jennifer lure Ben to help the Terrans finish building another Defiant. We meet Worf and Nog's mirror counterparts, and we also see the return of the Agonizer. Oh, hell yeah. I don't know why I did that. I fucking hate the Mirror Universe so much. Additionally, Season 4 drops a few self-contained entries like Starship Down, Our Man Bashir, which introduces Julian's James Bond-inspired holoprogram, The Muse, the worst episode of the show, and a neat courtroom drama in Rules of Engagement. Dax and Worf join Kor to find the Sword of Kahless in an episode of the same name, which introduces lore surrounding the Herc, an alien race that plundered Kronos 1,000 years prior. While this adventure doesn't turn out as he hopes, Kor will get another last hurrah in Season 7's Once More Under the Breach, and To the Death marks the discovery of another interstellar gateway of the extinct Iconian species, first introduced in TNG's Contagion, as well as the introduction of the Vorta Weyoun, played by Jeffrey Combs in what will become a recurring role. And what a role, might I say. Finally, Broken Link takes Odo to the new Founder's homeworld to be tried by the Great Link for killing another changeling, and as his punishment, Odo is turned into a solid. Dealing with this transformation will mark a good chunk of Odo's characterization in Season 5, at a time when the Federation deals with another threat, Gowron's declaration of war on the Federation unless they relinquish their claim on the Arcanus sector.
Gowron, the head of the Klingon Empire, is a changeling.
The Season 5 premiere, Apocalypse Rising, reveals that it's not Gowron who is the changeling, but General Martok, played by J.G. Hertzler. Odo had been misled by the Great Link, but he discovers the true culprit and roots him out. The real Martok, we'll find out, has been replaced 2 years prior and has been in a Breen prison camp. However, while the Martok changeling had been the one pushing Gowron to declare war on the Federation, Gowron is reluctant to end the war unless the Klingons can annex Arcanus. While this war continues, Season 5 also gets DS9 back on track with developing Cold War tensions with the Dominion, which the writers had felt was missing in Season 4. Personal relationships also deepen. For instance, in Looking for Parmak in All the Wrong Places, Worf helps Quark woo his Klingon ex-wife Grilka after her house has taken financial losses during the war, and O'Brien and Kira attempt to deflate their sexual tension before things go too far. Worf's controlling nature is further put on display in Let He Who Is Without Sin, when he derails a vacation on Risa to hang out with, let's be real, a terrorist group called the New Essentialists, who believe the Federation has drifted away from its core values. In their eyes, life's become too easy. Hey, if they think that's the case, they should come back to the early 21st century.
Support me on Patreon.
They hijack Rise's weather control network, a crime that's never brought up again. And besides this, the episode serves as sort of a microcosm of how a lot of fans are frustrated with the way Worf is written in the series, and how his relationship with Jadzia has always felt a little off. But the episode also demonstrates a compelling amount of political disagreement among Starfleet officers that's mostly absent from TNG. Additionally, this episode reveals Lita's mutual attraction towards Rom, and when we find out Curzon Dax died during sex.
Death by Jamaharan. I suppose there are worse ways to go.
But the ugly side of war is not hidden from viewers, quite the contrary. Nor the battle to the strong thrusts Jake Sisko in the midst of the Battle of Agilon Prime, where he's accompanied Dr. Bashir as a reporter. The PTSD Jake's experiences give him cannot be understated. This is followed by a couple episodic entries, including The Assignment, in which a Pa-Wraith, the celestial enemies of the Prophets, possesses Keiko's body and tries to get Miles to annihilate the Prophets with chronoton energy. And in Trials and Tribulations, the crew travels back to the 23rd century to stop an assassination attempt on James T. Kirk by Klingon intelligence officer Arn Darvin during the Enterprise's visit to Deep Space Station K7. The story is recounted to Dolmer and Luxley of the Department of Temporal Investigations, who note how Kirk had 17 separate temporal violations. The characters also confront Worf about TOS-era Klingons' lack of forehead ridges, to which he responds,
"We do not discuss it with outsiders."
This is of course later addressed further by an arc in Season 4 of Enterprise, which states that the cranial changes are the result of the augment virus. While this storyline is interesting, I personally think it's rather unnecessary. I don't think it's ever been necessary to focus so much on visual literalism when it comes to the limitations of 1960s makeup technology and VFX technology. But That's just me. Back to relationships. It'll still be a while before Odo confesses his feelings to Kira, but even then, there's still some road bumps along the way. Things Past reveals that Odo oversaw the execution of 3 innocent Bajoran slaves during the occupation, because he couldn't prove their innocence, and their alleged crimes turned into a cold case. His adversarial relationship with Quark is put to the test when the two are stranded on an inhospitable world in The Ascent. Sisko's attitudes about being the emissary of the prophets also begin to soften when he experiences visions regarding the ancient city of Bahala in Rapture. However, the intensity of his visions becomes so severe that Jake gives his consent to Bashir to perform life-saving surgery on Ben's brain.
No! You took them away!
We had no choice. You were dying.
I almost had it.
Odo's shapeshifting returns after he is healed by a dying infant changeling in The Begotten, and we return to another adversarial relationship, taking the form of a personal vendetta in For the Uniform, when Sisko obsessively pursues Michael Eddington, now a charismatic leader of the Maquis. This storyline is still one of my favorites in DS9 for multiple reasons. Number one, if I haven't mentioned it in any of my other Trek lore videos before, I feel like there's kind of a consensus that the Maquis have a point. Being forced to move from their homes under the terms of the Federation-Cardassian Treaty is all too relatable to many historical and current-day forced migrations. Eddington compares Sisko's obsession with him to the character from Les Miserables,
Inspector Javert, the French policeman who spends 20 years chasing a man for stealing a loaf of bread.
He says Sisko doesn't know when to walk away. But as Sisko would argue, Eddington has misled his followers into believing they can return to their homes again one day, putting them in danger. The moral complexities of this conflict are reflective of the gray areas DS9 expertly explores, as is Sisko choosing to become the villain. As a proportional response to the Maquis poisoning the atmosphere of a Cardassian colony, Sisko poisons the atmosphere of a Maquis colony, forcing them to evacuate. Thus, the origins of the fan-assigned nickname Benjamin Warcrimes Sisko.
You betrayed your uniform!
And you're betraying yours, right now!
Later, Eddington becomes a martyr in Blaze of Glory. Martok is liberated from the Brain prison camp in Purgatory's Shadow, which reveals that weeks before, Julian was replaced with a changeling too. In another massive lore drop, we also learn that Enabran Tain is Garrick's father. The subsequent episode, By Inferno's Light, sees the prisoners, including Worf, escape from the internment camp. Cardassia also officially joins the Dominion at this point, and Dukat has positioned himself as the leader of Cardassia's civilian government. This extension of the Dominion's presence in the Alpha Quadrant puts an end to hostilities between the Federation and the Klingon Empire, who now have a common enemy once again. And Martok is chosen to lead a permanent Klingon military contingent on the station. But even with these developments, personal revelations are far from over. Episode 16, Dr. Bashir, I presume, sees Dr. Louis Zimmerman, designer of Starfleet's emergency medical hologram, come aboard the station to evaluate Bashir as the basis for a new medical hologram. After interviewing Bashir's colleagues, Zimmerman becomes convinced he must interview Julian's parents. This is Julian's biggest nightmare because it results in their family's biggest secret getting revealed, that Julian was genetically engineered as a child. This is, of course, a procedure that is illegal under Federation law because of the eugenics wars. Miles comments that there hasn't been a case involving an augment officer in over 100 years, which could be retroactively viewed as a reference to Una Chin Riley's scandal in Strange New Worlds. As a compromise to keep Julian from having to resign, his father agrees to a 2-year sentence in a minimum security penal colony. In tandem with this familial departure, though, as Lita is about to make a new life with Zimmerman, Rom finally confesses his love for her, and she reciprocates. Fun fact, a Starfleet admiral in this episode references the eugenics wars as a mid-22nd century conflict, which was later admitted by Ronald D. Moore to be a mistake. That said, there was a rumor floating around in the 90s that the Star Trek writers were planning on retconning the dates of the eugenics wars to the mid-21st century, concurrent with TNG's dating of World War III, which was finally confirmed in 2023 by the Strange New Worlds episode Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. tomorrow. A couple more episodic entries follow this, one of which reveals the fellow who writes Julian's holo programs is named Felix, and another one in which we meet Quark's cousin Gala as he participates in an arms deal that goes south. Ties of Blood and Water marks the return of Wei-Yun, who we learn, like all Vorta, is a clone. Kira's relationship with the dying Tekini Gamor is strained after more details about his activities during the occupation are revealed. Rom lets himself become influenced to get Lita to sign a prenup in Ferengi love songs, but gives in after Lita protests how restrictive it is. Given the rules of Ferengi society, you can understand why. Lita and Rom are married in the season finale on the eve of the Dominion War.
Why don't you just let Garrick design a dress on his own? You know whatever he comes up with will be beautiful.
My dear, I find your blind adoration both flattering and disturbing.
But in the lead up to the finale, some other major developments move forward other characters' arcs. In Children of Time, a temporal accident crashes the Defiant on a planet in the Gamma Quadrant populated by their descendants. An older Odo, who has gotten better at shapeshifting, is able to finally confess his feelings to Kira. Unfortunately for the colonists, who have developed an eclectic culture on the planet, their existence is negated when the Defiant is able to avoid the events that kept them from escaping the planet in the first place. Empok Nor sees Garrick, O'Brien, and Nog travel to an abandoned Cardassian station, identical in design to DS9, to look for spare parts. Garrick is influenced by a psychotropic drug dispersed throughout the station's atmosphere that causes him to become homicidal. Fortunately, they make it out before he can kill the characters that actually have plot armor. Nog helps Jake secure a Willie Mays baseball card to cheer up Ben in the Cards, and in Call to Arms, Starfleet mines the Bajoran wormhole to keep Dominion reinforcements from entering the Alpha Quadrant. Bajor joins the Romulan Empire in signing a non-aggression pact with the Dominion, as neither wants their territory to become a hotbed of fighting in the coming war. Starfleet is forced to evacuate DS9 as the Cardassians retake the station, but Jake stays behind to document the new occupation as a journalist. Starfleet's presence on Bajor has not been fully abandoned though. Sisko will be back, and he leaves Dukat a message to demonstrate this. The first 6 episodes of DS9's 6th season form one of the most emotionally intense arcs in the series. The season begins 3 months after Call to Arms, and the Federation is unequivocally losing the war with the Dominion. Admiral William Ross, played by Barry Jenner, joins the cast and is tasked with assigning Sisko and the Defiant crew to dangerous missions, often behind enemy lines. Indeed, having the Starfleet officers on a ship again is a fun change of pace, even if it's temporary. Since passage through the wormhole is not possible, the Dominion has started breeding Jem'Hadar in the Alpha Quadrant, and these new Jem'Hadar come to be known as Alphas. Tension between Alpha and Gamma Jem'Hadar is later put on display in episode 14, One Little Ship. Cutting off Ketracel White's supply lines marks the plot of A Time to Stand. In Rocks and Shoals, the Defiant crew, after crashing a stolen Jem'Hadar ship on an alien world, encounter a group of stranded Jem'Hadar with only one vial of White left and an injured Vorta master named Kevin. He'll show up again later. Meanwhile, on DS9, now renamed to its Cardassian designation, Terak Nor, Kira struggles working side by side with the Dominion. She, Quark, Rom, and Jake organize a secret resistance, which Odo joins despite concerns about how it'll disrupt station security. Still an authoritarian at heart, but he's our favorite authoritarian. Anyway, Odo's key role in the Resistance is threatened when the female changeling visits Terak Nor and tries to lure him back to the Great Link, which she reveals is more important to the Dominion than controlling the Alpha Quadrant. This is a big deal, and it will come to inform both characters' actions later in the series. As you can imagine, Starfleet organizes a mission to retake the station called Operation Return, which they pull off in the episode Sacrifice of Angels, although they do have some help. The Prophets themselves intervene, making a fleet of Dominion reinforcements disappear once the wormhole is reopened and allowing Starfleet to reclaim DS9.
Victory was within our grasp. We have to evacuate the station, sir!
As Dukat prepares to evacuate the station, Zial is shot by Damar for confessing she helped Kira and company escape. How Dukat deals with the death of his daughter will mark one of the most profound transformations to his character throughout the entire series. This 6-episode arc is followed by a lighter episode, You Are Cordially Invited. Worf's male friends join him in a Klingon ritual to test their endurance.
We now begin a fast. I will continue until the day of the wedding.
Well, that's 4 days away.
It is a short time, I know, but we must make the best of it.
And Jadzia must impress Martok's wife before she and Worf can marry. Worf had joined Martok's house in Season 5, as well as his son Alexander Rozhenko in the episode Sons and Daughters, which reveals Alexander has also joined the Klingon Defense Force. Kira briefly engages in a romance with Bareilles' mirror counterpart in Resurrection, probably one of the biggest letdowns of this season and ultimately rather inconsequential, although it does reveal that on the other side, the Bajoran religion was likely suppressed centuries ago. Statistical probabilities sees Damar take over from Dukat as leader of the Cardassian government, and it also introduces a group of genetically engineered savants who Julian has brought to the station to work with. These augments had negative side effects from being genetically altered as children and were never able to normally integrate with society. But Julian believes they can make a useful contribution to the Federation. What they come up with at first, however, is not well received by Julian's colleagues, which is that, according to their statistical analysis, the Federation should surrender to the Dominion to save lives. After Sisko understandably rejects this out of hand, the savants refocus their efforts to models that reduce casualties without surrendering. If there's any characters in Star Trek that are autism-coded, it's definitely these savants, and it is not done well, in my opinion. This is, the 2 episodes that feature these savants are probably the most unwatchable of DS9, and unfortunately, they're like one of the first episodes that one of my friends was exposed to, and that like influenced him to think that, oh God, is every episode of DS9 like this? No, most are significantly better. But the original proposal comes back to haunt Julian, as 9 episodes later, in Inquisition, he's visited by Sloan of Section 31, Starfleet's mysterious, off-the-books intelligence organization. Sloan subjects him to a holographic simulation that tests his loyalty to the Federation and then offers Julian a job in the organization, which Julian declines. For now. That's like a thing in the novels. Kevin shows back up in The Magnificent Ferengi when Quark and a team of associates facilitate a prisoner exchange to save Ishka from the Dominion. However, this task isn't without some complications.
He's alive! No, he isn't. It's just the neural stimulator.
Sisko is stranded on a deserted planet with Dukat in Waltz, and Sisko prods an increasingly unstable Dukat into admitting that he wishes he exterminated the Bajoran race when he was prefect. This is just the tip of the iceberg with how off the rails Dukat becomes as DS9 progresses. Sisko's mental stability is also called into question when he receives a vision of being a black sci-fi author in 1950s America named Benny Russell in Far Beyond the Stars. This is another one of the highest rated episodes of the series, and it's fun to see the actors play different characters without their alien makeup. The stress and sheer injustice Benny faces causes him to experience a mental breakdown in a scene that nearly sent Avery Brooks over the edge, according to his fellow actors.
That picture, I created it, and it's real! Don't you understand? It is real!
While these are just visions, it's been stated that Benny Russell might have been a real person somewhere in the multiverse. And indeed, Strange New Worlds shows that in the Prime universe, he also authored at least one fantasy book called The Kingdom of Elysia. Honor Among Thieves introduces another mini-arc involving one of the main characters' associations with the Orion Syndicate. The Orion Syndicate, you say? This time, Miles Miles is put on the planet Farius by Starfleet to infiltrate the Syndicate, but he ends up befriending the man he's supposed to betray. The man, a human from the New Sydney colony named Bilby, ultimately loses his life, but his family is taken care of by the Syndicate, and the O'Briens adopt his cat, Chester. Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night sees Kira use the Orb of Time to confirm a statement by Dukat that her mother, Kira Maru, was once his lover. To her disgust, she finds out that her mother did indeed become a collaborator, but realizes Maru embraced her role as a comfort woman to ensure her family was well compensated. Maybe embraced is not the right word. Coped with, I guess, is probably more accurate. Nerys doesn't forgive her mother for this, but the complex, twisted motivations that drove Maru's behavior are part and parcel with the kind of moral gray areas DS9 again relishes in. While this episode is not listed as one of the more popular ones, it does introduce the recurring motif of Julian and Miles' Battle of the Alamo holo program. On the other hand, episode 19, In the Pale Moonlight, is a frequent go-to for the fans when listing their favorites, myself included. It has a slightly different format from most DS9 episodes, with the frame story featuring Sisko recounting his recent events in a log. In a classic demonstration of how the road to hell is paved with good intentions, Sisko enlists the help of Garrick to get the Romulans to enter the Dominion War on the Federation's side. But to do this, Sisko must make bribes and commit a number of other questionable actions. Notably, he has a political prisoner fake a holo recording of a Dominion War Room meeting planning an invasion of Romulus. Sisko invites one of the most pro-Dominion members of the Romulan Senate, Vreenak, to view the recording, but he can tell it's a forgery.
It's a fake!
In a terrible coincidence, Vreenak's shuttle explodes after he departs his next destination, making it look like the Dominion assassinated him, and the data rod with the holo recording can no longer be definitively proven to be a forgery or not. Of course, this was all arranged by Garrick, and as a net result, the Romulans join the Alpha Quadrant Alliance. And the worst part is, Sisko can live with it.
I can live with it.
A much lighter entry follows called His Way, which introduces the self-aware holographic singer Vic Fontaine. Designed by Felix, he coaches Odo on how to finally woo Kira.
It's time to have some fun. What does fun have to do with Major Kira? I'll pretend I didn't hear that.
And the two share a first date and first kiss. The remaining episodes preceding the season finale are more episodic, starting with an encounter between the Prophets and Pa-Wraiths on the promenade in The Reckoning. One of the most notable aspects of this episode is further demonstration of Kai Wynn's jealousy of Sisko, as she has never spoken with the Prophets personally, but as the Emissary, he is becoming more comfortable speaking to them on a semi-regular basis. In Valiant, Jake and Nog encounter a Defiant-class ship called the Valiant, crewed by Starfleet cadets, former lower deckers, who seem like they're right out of Battlestar Galactica. That is to say, they've spent months in combat and have bitten off more than they can chew. This episode was naturally written by Ronald D. Moore and features a character who reminded me of Danny Stevens from For All Mankind. Not for the most flattering reason, to be honest. We find out Brunt has become Grand Nagus in Prophet and Lace, replacing Zek after he institutes reforms that grant women equal rights on Ferenginar. But Zek regains his position in a scheme that involves Quark temporarily getting a sex change to fool a member of the Ferengi Commerce Authority into reinstituting Zek, a plan which succeeds. While this episode was panned at the time, and there's a lot about it that's pretty cringe, some have noted that it actually plays better today, and in any event, the experience makes Quark more empathetic towards his female employees. After the O'Briens saved their daughter Molly from a decade-long isolation on Golana in Time's Orphan, ultimately saving her before she can experience this trauma, the Defiant crew buries a fellow Starfleet officer stranded on an L-class planet in The Sound of Her Voice. In the monumental season finale, The Tears of the Prophets, Dukat joins forces with a Pa-Wraith to turn the orbs dark, which causes the wormhole to collapse. In order to complete his task, Dukat is compelled to kill Jadzia, guarding the Orb of Contemplation, marking the first true death of a main Trek character since Tasha Yar in Season 1 of TNG. Jadzia's death was incorporated into DS9 as Terry Farrell had become frustrated with not being listened to by the producers, among other reasons. Although she was deeply heartbroken that she felt compelled to leave the show. This will obviously have significant repercussions in Season 7. In the DS9 Season 7 premiere, Image in the Sand, Kira has been promoted to Colonel in the Bajoran militia, and Sisko has been on extended leave from Starfleet for months. He has visions of uncovering a face buried beneath the sands of Tyree, and it's the face of his mother, Sarah Sisko. Ben plans to go to Tyree to find more answers, and Jake and Joseph inform him that they're coming along with him. But before they can leave in Shadows and Symbols, they are joined by the newest Dax host, Ezri, played by Nicole DeBoer. Having previously served on the Destiny, Ezri was the closest Trill when the Dax symbiont experienced complications on the way back to the home world. She hasn't gone through the years of initiation, training, and preparation that most hosts do. She's been thrust into this new existence, and indeed, for much of the season, she experiences bouts of confusion and disorientation about how to navigate her new identity.
There's times when the computer asks me to identify myself and I have to think about what to say. Or worse yet, there's days when I wake up and I don't even know if I'm a man or a woman until I pull back the covers.
But for now, she's essentially back with her old friend, Benjamin. And on Tyree, Ben uncovers the Orb of the Emissary, which reveals Sarah was possessed by a prophet who led her to Joseph, meaning Ben's birth was completely arranged by the prophets. This is why Sarah left Joseph early in Ben's childhood, a trauma Joseph has dealt with for years.
Why did it have to be me?
Because it could be no one else.
Had to be me. Someone else might have gotten it wrong.
Indeed, even Ben is still traumatized with visions from the Pa-wraiths of Benny Russell being trapped in a mental institution with Dr. Wyckoff, played by DeMar's actor Casey Biggs. But Sisko and Russell persist. After finding answers on Tyree, Ben, Jake, and Dax return to the station. Ezri's arrival, naturally, causes complications to arise vis-a-vis the other people who were in Jadzia's life. Worf especially avoids Ezri for a long time as he cannot get past the fact that his wife both is and isn't really gone.
I was your wife.
You are not Jadzia. Jadzia died and went to Stovokor. I do not know you, nor do I wish to know you.
He does eventually decide to talk to her, and the two even have a sexual encounter while stranded on an alien planet, but they resolve that they're better off as friends. Besides, Ezri more so has eyes on Julian, who has himself been after Dax from day one. Not everyone is happy about Dax's return, though. In particular, in After Image, Garrick expresses deep frustration with how Ezri, a counselor who ironically is having emotional distress of her own, struggles to calm him down following a medical incident. She pales in comparison, he viciously proclaims, to her predecessor.
You're not worthy of the name Dax. I knew Jadzia. She was vital, alive. She owned herself, and you don't even know who you are.
He's also torn by his actions, helping the Federation Alliance make moves against the Dominion, despite his people being part of the Dominion themselves.
And what lives would I be saving? Human? Klingon? Romulan?
And Cardassian.
No, not Cardassians! They're going to fight to the bitter end. The Dominion will see to that.
When it comes to how people feel about Ezri, there are obviously going to be comparisons made to Jadzia, even though they're really totally different characters. But I think that DeBoer and the writers did pretty much the best they could with the hand that they were dealt, or nearly so. They're effectively having to introduce an entirely new character to the main cast and navigate the challenges of addressing how she relates to the previous host of the Dax symbiont. I can see how people find Ezri's constant confusion to be a little much, but you gotta understand where she's coming from. She wasn't prepared for this, and that's the point. So in that respect, I think that Ezri is a pretty underrated character. In fact, more than Nog, I can see how Ezri must have served as a template for Tendi, if only loosely. Dare I say, Tendy's even a better version of Esri from a writing standpoint. There are so many parallels. Attractive alien science division officer with a short haircut who's thrust into a new life. Although in Tendy's case, she actively chose to leave her old one behind. Also, just as Tendy's family is the 5th wealthiest in the Orion Syndicate, Esri's biological family, the Tegans, own the 5th largest Pergium mining facility in the Sepphoris sector. These heavy episodes are followed by a more lighthearted one, Take Me Out to the Holosuite, in which Sisko trains his crew to play baseball with hopes of beating his arrogant former classmate, Vulcan Captain Solak, and the crew of the USS Tecumseh. The Niners ultimately lose, but their real victory is the friends they made along the way. Following this, the Savants return, and Bashir performs neurosurgery on the augment named Serena that allows her to talk again, giving her a chance at a new life. On the war front, a clone of Weyoun defects to the Federation and pledges to serve Odo, but he's ultimately forced to give his life to save Odo's after the Dominion tracks them down. We also find out in this episode that the female changeling has been infected with a morphogenic virus, one that's in fact infected the entire Great Link. We later learn this virus was engineered by Section 31, as part of a conspiracy to commit genocide against the Founders. After his visit to Earth and Homefront and Paradise Lost, Odo had been a carrier for 3 years. He infected the female changeling and the Great Link by proxy. Another deadly situation occurs when the characters are involved in a Jem'Hadar siege on the planetoid AR-558. Nog, who's been in combat plenty of times, continues to express admiration of his Starfleet comrades, even though many of them are starting to lose their humanity. Quark gives an impassioned speech highlighting what he sees as the Federation's hypocrisy, and it's, in my opinion, one of the most important exchanges in the entire franchise.
They're a wonderful, friendly people, as long as their bellies are full and their holosuites are working. But take away their creature comforts, deprive them of food, sleep, sonic showers, put their lives in jeopardy over an extended period of time, and those same friendly, intelligent, wonderful people will become as nasty and as violent as the most bloodthirsty Klingon.
Quark's warnings about getting too emotionally involved in the conflict prove prescient as Nog loses his leg in battle. Nog receives a new leg and seeks the emotional comfort of Vic's holosuite program in It's Only a Paper Moon. At first, his fellow officers tolerate his desire to stay in the holosuite during his recovery, but Nog becomes obsessive, wanting to live out a fantasy forever instead of returning to the real world. While Vic enjoys having his program run continuously and gets to experience more of a full life, he confronts Nog about his refusal to confront his fears.
If I can get shot, if I can lose my leg, anything can happen to me, Vic. I could die tomorrow.
Ultimately, after being imparted some sage advice about the need to live a real life instead of slowly dying in a virtual world, he returns to duty and continues his physical and mental recovery. Dukat continues his drift towards the embrace of the Pa-Wraiths and Covenant, leading a cult of Bajorans on Empok Nor. He abducts Kira in an attempt to sway her to his side, reasoning that the prophets abandoned Bajor by standing by during the occupation and swearing that the Pa-Wraiths aren't evil, just misunderstood. You know, like him. The illusion of Dukat's divinity is shattered when Kira rallies his followers to turn against him after it's revealed he's impregnated one of them behind her husband's back. But while Dukat has escaped for now, he'll return later. Ezri's cognitive dissonance surrounding her identity continues to manifest in a couple other episodes this season, starting with Prodigal Daughter, one of the more soap opera-y episodes in DS9. Ezri's summoned back to her family's home at the new Sydney colony in the Sepphoris system. The Tegans become involved in a mystery surrounding the murder of Bilby's wife, Morica. Morica had been under the protection of the Orion Syndicate by putting her on the Tegan family's payroll, but a series of events led this arrangement to be threatened. Ezri's brother Norvo killed Morica to keep her quiet, and he's sentenced to 30 years in prison for his crime. And in Field of Fire, Emissary must summon one of Dax's previous hosts, Duran, through the rite of emergence to solve another murder mystery aboard DS9. After a final Mirror Universe entry that sees the Terran rebels claim victory, and also introduces Mirror Esri, Brunt, and even Vic, Odo meets one of the other 100 infant changelings, Laz, in Chimera. Laz shares his people's distrust of the solids and parts ways with Odo to find others like him. Odo and his solid friends get a chance to help out Vic in Bada Bing Bada Bang after mobsters take over the hotel containing Vic's lounge in a Jack-in-the-Box subroutine Felix introduced into the program to keep things interesting. Cisco at first finds the whole thing ridiculous and can't believe his entire senior staff is involved. But it's not just because Vic's a hologram.
Las Vegas, 1962, that's my problem. In 1962, black people weren't very welcome there. Oh, sure, they could be performers or janitors, but customers never.
Ultimately, though, he comes around, and the ensuing heist sequence is extremely satisfying to watch unfold. Cisco and Vic even share a duet at the end. After this hollow adventure, Bashir is called upon to complete another real-world infiltration by inadvertently removing Romulan Senator Krenak, an advocate of the Federation Alliance, from gaining a seat on the Empire's continuing committee. Section 31 uses him to expose a fake assassination plot against hardline Senator Koval, and Krenak is implicated, leading to her dismissal. Section 31 wants Koval on the committee, as his previous opposition to the Alliance serves to reinforce his arguments to keep the Alliance intact. Krenak is a patriot, meaning if it serves the Empire's interests to abandon the Alliance, she would follow suit. But while Bashir expresses more disappointment to Ross that the Federation would be involved in such activities, the Federation is going to need all the help it can get in the coming weeks. Indeed, after the final episodic entry of Inter Arma Einem Sealant Legas, which the writers have admitted is one of their more pretentious titles, comes the epic 9-part finale of DS9. Ben proposes to Cassidy, although he's warned by the prophets that if he marries her, they'll know nothing but sorrow. He elects to ignore this, and the two are wed by Ross in a private ceremony. After Esri searches for Worf when he doesn't come back from a mission, the two are captured by the Breen and find their way to Cardassia, where Damar, who's finally had enough of the Dominion, switches sides and begins to lead a civilian uprising on his homeworld. The Dominion had relinquished control of several Cardassian planets to the Breen, and this is the final straw for Damar. The Breen even attack Earth and devastate Federation fleets with a powerful energy weapon, destroying the Defiant. But the Alliance figures out a workaround, and Cisco is awarded with another ship, the Sao Paulo, rechristened to the Defiant. Dukat surgically alters himself to appear Bajoran, and posing as a farmer named Anjal, worms his way into the presence of Kai Wynn, who, having never spoken with the prophets, has suddenly been contacted by the Pah-Wraiths. He convinces her that the Pah-Wraiths are Bajor's true gods, and she seeks the Book of the Kostamojan to learn how to free the Pah-Wraiths from being imprisoned in Bajor's fire caves. The two accomplish this even after Wynn finds out that Anjal is Dukat in disguise, and Dukat is temporarily stricken with blindness and forced to live as a beggar on the streets. Meanwhile, Odo begins to display symptoms of the Section 31 virus, and his symptoms worsen as he accompanies Kira on a mission to train Damar's rebels. Some of Damar's followers are not comfortable with Kira's presence and try to provoke her by reminding her Odo collaborated with the Cardassians, but she doesn't view it that way. Bashir and O'Brien eventually uncover a cure for Odo's illness, the price being Sloane's life and many of the secrets that remained inside his head. Another major death occurs when Worf kills Gowron for his military incompetence, and Martok becomes Chancellor. Rom also ascends to Grand Nagus upon Zek's retirement, much to Quark's frustration. Rom will continue many of the progressive reforms Zek has begun to institute on Ferenginar, setting them up to become accepted as Federation members in 2381 as seen in Lower Decks. But before the Alliance can win the peace, they must first win the war once and for all. After the organized cells of Damar's rebellion are wiped out by the Dominion, the civilian uprising takes over. The Dominion is forced to withdraw deeper into Cardassian territory, and as a punishment for turning against their allies, the Dominion commits genocide against Cardassia. Over 800 million dead. To abate further destruction, Odo links with the Founder and heals her, also convincing her to surrender and stand trial in exchange for Odo returning home to the Great Link. A peace treaty is signed, and Sisko is called by the prophets to the Fire Caves, where Wynn perishes and Sisko drives Dukat and the Pa-Wraiths back to their celestial prison. Sisko himself still has lots to do with the prophets, but he promises Cassidy he'll be back. As of when this video is being made, Sisko has not made a canon return to corporeal existence for at least 6 years after the events of What You Leave Behind. But while Sisko is working hard in the Celestial Temple, Miles has returned to Earth with his family to teach at the Academy. Julian and Ezri get together, Worf becomes Federation ambassador to Kronos, Kira assumes command of the station, and Jake presumably continues his profession as a writer. But in this post-Dominion War galaxy, there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done. Seemingly, by the time of Lower Decks, the galactic economy is back on track, but the repercussions of the Dominion War will last for generations. Besides Star Trek Nemesis, the finale of Star Trek Voyager, and parts of the 2009 Star Trek reboot film, until the premiere of Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Lower Decks in 2020, DS9 served as the furthest glimpse into the future of the Alpha Quadrant in the entire franchise. In the early 2000s, Pocket Books began publishing a series of novels called the DS9 Relaunch Series. But of course, these novels aren't canon. Star Trek Discovery's third season takes us into the 4th millennium, but so far, Lower Decks is the closest thing to a post-Dominion War state of the galaxy that we've seen on screen in Star Trek. In fact, I have a whole 2-hour video essay, that's longer than this one obviously, in which I analyze the first 4 seasons of Lower Decks, which I highly encourage you to check out right now. In all likelihood, I'll eventually have retrospectives on Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard, and the other series as well. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below and don't forget to share it. That stuff really helps me out. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that as well so you won't miss future uploads, and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. If you want to support my work even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/OrangeRiver, link in the description, or become a YouTube member by clicking the join button on my channel page. By becoming a Patreon member, you get access to awesome perks like behind-the-scenes photos and videos, patron and member-only polls, name in the credits, merch discounts, and more. Or you can drop a one-time super thanks or PayPal donation. All are appreciated. Links to my PayPal as well as my social media and merch store are in the description too. That's all I have for this week. Live long and prosper. So like you're hearing noises, and you're just coming in.
Okay.
And you're catching me in the act.
Okay.
All right. So let me know when.
Am I coming through the door? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I talking or anything, or just coming in here?
You can say things like, "What's going on?"
Okay.
All right. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tell me when you're rolling.
All right. I'm rolling. What the fuck?
Oh yeah.
What the fuck?
What the fuck? Get the fuck out of here!
Oh my god!
I have an idea for a second take. Action.
Oh my god. Oh shit. Oh my god. Hold on. Yeah. Okay.